In part 4 of the video, we had learned how to create a profile for the user and add the details of the user in the real-time database. In part 5 of this video series, what we do is we'll create a users tab in which we'll show all the users that are available on our app. So to do that, basically we'll also be introducing ourselves to the UICollectionView controller. So let's start. Let's start by adding a collection view controller. So coming to the main storyboard and selecting collection view controller. Restrict its size to 4.7 inches like always. And connect the connection view controller to the tab bar controller. What we'll also do is we'll embed the collection view controller into a navigation bar controller. Next, we'll change the name of the tab by coming here, clicking on the item. In the attributes inspector, we'll name this users and give the image of user. So there we have the image. Next, we come to the collection view controller. Go to the attributes, select the collection view first. Set the cell size to 100. Height and width both to 100. Coming to the section insets, set all 4 of them to 10 each. Once that's done, we have to add a new collection view controller class. So let's do that. Let's go to My App, File, New File. I will select iOS and select Cocoa Touch class. It's going to be a subclass of the UI collection view controller, and the class we'll name it as users collection view controller. Save the file. First thing we'll do is change the name of the reuse identifier to collection view cell. This is just for our own ease. You can name it whatever you want. Come to the main storyboard. Select the collection view controller and set its class to the class that we just created, which is users collection view controller. Next, what we do is we'll add an image view inside the collection view cell. This will basically be the profile picture of the user. And let's go here to the image and let's set the height and width to 80 each. And add the constraints, which is a top constraint, and we'll limit the height and width to 80. And what we'll also do is we'll center it horizontally in the container. That should take care of it. What we'll also do is we'll add a UI label below the image, which will basically display the name of the user. Coming here, just quickly set the size of the text to a smaller size, which is about 13 should be fine. And again, what we'll do is we'll add the 2 constraints required for this, which is basically really center it into the container. And we'll also limit the height and width. One more thing that we'll need to do is give it the vertical spacing from the image. Next, we'll create a class which defines how this particular cell looks. Let's call a file, new file. It's going to be a file of Cocoa Touch class, and it's going to be, let's call it collection view cell. I already named it here, and it's going to be a subclass of UI collection view cell. Click on next and click create. So basically, this collection view cell is going to define how that cell looks. So let's go to the main storyboard. And first assign the new class that we created to the collection view cell. So let's click on the collection view cell and set this to collection view cell. Now let's open up the assistant editor and select the collection view cell class that we created. Here let's create an outlet for our image and call it user image, and an outlet for the label and call it user name. Let's also create a function which will basically make the image round. So let's call it function make it round, and sorry, it's going to be called func. And what it's going to do is basically it's going to just change the corner radius. That should do it. But since this is inside a collection view, what we'll have to do is we'll have to override the layout subviews for it to work. And here is where we'll call this, which is self.makeItRound. And obviously before that we have to call super.layout subviews. And override is spelled with a double R. So there we have it. And we'll also add another line of code which is self.userimage.layer.masks to bounds equal to true. This ensures that the corner radius that we've set is maintained and everything around it is masked. Now before we start with the collection view controller, what we'll do is we'll go to the view controller.swift and we'll add some code here. What this code will do is when the user logs in for the first time, we'll store the user's name and the user's email on their profile page. And what we'll also do is we'll also store the small version of the profile picture. The reason we'll do this is the smaller version of the profile picture can easily be linked to, and if there are multiple pictures that we'll want to show multiple users, so it'll be easier and quicker to load the images. When we actually work it out, you'll understand why we did this. And we'll store the profile picture in the database and in the storage. So let's get started with this. So we'll say after the user is logged in, we'll say if error is equal to nil, let storage equal to, just ensure that you imported Firebase storage and Firebase database here. I've already done that. Let storage equal to FIR storage dot storage, let storage ref equal to and we'll refer our particular URL here. And we'll also set the node where we want to actually store the small profile picture. Let's call it profile pic small .jpg. Just for ease, let's also store the user ID into a variable. And also get a reference to our database. Now what we'll do is we need to read from the database and retrieve the data. So we go to the database ref dot child, and under the node user profile, under that we need to go into the node which is the user ID, And under that, we'll go and check for the profile pic small. And what we'll do here is observe single event of type. Because we don't want it to be continuously reading, so we'll just use the observe single event of type just to read it once. And dot value with block snapshot in. What we can do is we can just get rid of this other editor. And why are we getting this error? Okay, it has to be FIR database, sorry. Then what we'll do is we'll just store this profile picture into a variable. So let's call it let profile pic equal to snapshot dot value as a string. The reason we're using it as an optional is because if the user is logging for the first time, it's going to return null because the user will have no data. So we have to take it as an optional value to ensure that we get a nil when we test this out. So now what we can do is we can do if profile pic equal to nil, which we wouldn't be able to do if we hadn't saved it as an optional. Now we need to basically get the user's small profile picture and upload it to the database and the storage. So let's just name this as profile pic, and if let image data equal to ns data, contents of URL user dot photo URL, which is stored by Firebase automatically. Here what to do is start an upload task. Profile pic ref dot put data. This is code directly from the Firebase docs. Metadata nil. In that ahead we have metadata and error in. So if error equal to nil, that means if the upload task is successful, let's store the download URL into a variable. And we will force unwrap the photo URL as well. And also let's save this into a, let's save the URL into a database. So under the user profile node, under that we go to the child, which will be user.uid. Under that we'll go to profile pic small and we set value download URL, and we convert that to an absolute string. And this is metadata. We want to store it as a string, so we'll ensure that we convert it to an absolute string. And we'll say else print error in downloading image, just a small error. Now that the image is uploaded, we'll also upload, like we said, update the user's data on the profile page. So that will basically do database ref dot child. I'll just show you one, and then I'll just copy paste the rest of the code because it's going to be repetitive. It's going to be under the user dot uid node. Under that we go into name, set value, user dot display name, which Firebase stores for us. So I'm just going to pause this and copy the rest of the code. So as you can see, the first time the user logs in, he'll get a display name and he'll get an email. The rest of the values will be empty, or it'll just create the fields for the user. We'll also just add an else block here, which basically just prints the message saying the user has logged in earlier. And before we go into the collection view controller, we'll just make another change, which is going to the profile table view controller and adding the name column. So here we add name, so here we'll also have to add it. Basically it's going to be the same, so how about we just copy this, paste this on top and just edit it. This is going to be name, and one more change that we'll have to do over here is we'll have to also add when the user updates it. So we're going to have to also add it here. Same thing. This is going to be name, and instead of the placeholder it's going to be name. Okay, last thing we need to do is we need to go to the users collection view controller and set that up. So coming into the users collection view controller, we need to retrieve the data from the database, that is the user, all the users, their name and their profile picture, and display it in a clear format to see which users are available on our application. So let's see. Let's create a variable called database ref, and as always, Firebase database.reference. For this, we'll have to import Firebase database. Then here we'll create a variable called users dictionary, which will be of type NS dictionary, because the data will be returned as a JSON and we'll convert it into a dictionary to be able to access it. We'll also create two arrays called, let's call them user, we'll have to call it a var because we're going to be changing the value, user names array, which will be of type string, and a user images array, which will also be of type string. Coming to the viewDidLoad method, here we'll retrieve the data from the database and display it. So let's do that. Get the node that we want. You're familiar with this code, which we just used in the view controller. Just observe event type dot value with block, and that's called the data returned as snapshot in, and let's save the return JSON into a dictionary. As NS dictionary. Now we loop through the users dictionary. Now you have to understand this, that the data returned is in the format of user ID followed by the details of the user. So there's going to be user ID, and inside that is going to be the details of the user. Then there'll be another user ID and the other user's details inside that. So let's filter it in this way. We'll go for user ID and the details for that user in the users dictionary. What we want is, we want to save the image as details.object for key, and it's going to be called, remember we stored it as profile pic 50, and we have to make sure that it says a string and not NS URL, though it is already stored as a string. And let name equal to details.object for key name, because the user's name is stored under name, and as string. Also, we don't really want to show the full name of the user on the user's page, so let's split the name up and only show the first name. So let's say let first name equal to name, and we'll do components separated by string. space, and we'll select the first part. Component separated by string will basically split the name up into an array. Now what we need to do is we need to append the image and the name into the arrays that we had created on top, which are the user names array and the user images array. So self.user images array is dot append image, and self.user names array dot append and after we append the names and the image, we need to also reload the collection view for it to actually update. Collection view dot reload data. Now we've got the data, we've stored into arrays. Now let's configure the collection view itself. Number of sections in collection view, we're going to give the number of sections as 1. Number of items in collection view is going to be basically, we could either do a count of the number of images or the number of users in the array. So let's just do self.user images array dot count, and we need to configure the cell. If you remember, in the beginning we had created this class called collection view cell, which tells us how the cell is going to be configured. That we're going to use over here. So let's configure that. So let cell equal to collection view dot dequeue reusable cell with reuse identifier. The reuse identifier here is collection view cell. For index path, and we're going to force downcast this as collection view cell. Now what we have to do is let's get the image URL from the array. Since you want to display the image, you'll have to get the image URL. User images array, and in that we'll go index path dot row and let image data equal to ns data contents of URL image URL cell dot user, and we need the name of the user as well. Cell dot user image dot image equal to UI image data image data. Let's force unwrap that, and cell dot username dot text is equal to usernames array index path dot row. If you just look at this, what we're basically doing is, in the collection view, we're setting up the user's image and the user's name. So that's all that we're doing here, and then we just need to return the cell. It's already been done. Okay, so there's one more thing in the collection view controller which is different from the table view controller, and that is, if we're using a prototype cell like we've created here, the collection view cell, what we need to do is, in the collection view controller, there's this line which registers the cell. Register class UICollectionView cell.self. This we do not require if we are using a prototype cell. So let's test this out now. So what we'll see over here is, on the profile page, if we go to the profile page, we won't see the user's name because this user is already signed in. Also, going on to users is going to give us an error because the user's profile pic doesn't really exist, the small one. So instead of getting the error, we'll just log the user out and we'll log the user back in. What that will do is, the code that we put into the view controller will add the name of the user, and also we'll get the profile pic, the small profile pic, which we can confirm by going here, and we can see that we've got the name and we've got profile pic small stored over here. Now similarly, right now it's only showing us our own name and our own profile, we can see other users by logging in other users with their Facebook accounts. So I'm just going to pause the video, log in a few more users and show you. Okay, so I've logged in with 2 more other accounts, and currently I'm logged in with my personal account. So as you can see, we have 3 users over here now. And if we go to profile, this is my personal profile, and if we go into users, we'll see 3 users come up over there. As you can see, there was a lag between the images loading up and the time when we went on this page. So let's just quickly correct that. What we can do is we can show a loading icon while the time the page is loading. So let's just go to the main storyboard and the collection view controller. Let's just add an activity indicator view. Change its size, its style to large white. Change its color to red. And let's also select hides when stopped. Come into the split editor. Open up the user's collection view controller. We'll have to create an outlet for this. So let's control drag this. Let's call it AIV loading view, or just call it AIV loading. And when the view loads, let's call AIV loading loading.start animating. And once the collection view is reloaded, we'll stop animating it. So we call AIV loading dot stop animating. To be explicit, let's just add self to both of them. Let's quickly just run this again. So now if you go to the users, we see an activity view loading, and then it shows us the users. So this tutorial did take some time in the building blocks to get this together. So now we can see that the users that are there on our application. I think it'll be more useful if we know which of these is actually online and probably create like a chat in the future. So let's see how we're going to build on this in the future. But for now, I'd like you guys to try this out, and I hope you like this. Thanks.